Welcome to My Safety Tech Podcast with me, your host, Pete Thomas. In this week's episode, I'm speaking to Peter Jenkins. Peter is a senior partner with Riskfluent, where he works as a consultant, but he also set up a company called Simple Foundry. And I really like this because what he does is he specializes in training individuals and organizations to manage their health and safety digitally, but using a range of easily accessible tools. So things like Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and all of these other just readily accessible systems. He helps people digitize their process, make them more efficient, more effective, but without a ton of cost. And it's really quite straightforward. Peter, how you doing?
Good morning, Peter. I'm all right, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Thank you. That's a lot of energy you brought already. Fair play to you on Monday morning at 10 o'clock.
Oh, can I say it's like hair of the dog type of thing. If I keep it up, Peter, right, I'll carry on. But if it drops for a second, then dare I say I might not be able to pick it up again.
Fair enough. We'll try and keep the energy.
We can keep the energy high, indeed. That we can.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted you on the show, is because I think digital tech and AI and all of these conversations about large language models and artificial general intelligence it starts to get quite complicated, and people can shut down and they go, yeah, but that doesn't concern me. What can I do about that? And actually, there's an awful lot that people can be doing. But I guess before we get into that, I'd like to explore just this broader topic first of this digital literacy within the industry, because we sort of touched on that a little bit. You said that you looked at that when you were doing your degree.
Yes, yeah.
And I felt it, but an awful lot later. I've looked at it very recently when the golden thread requirements came in for fire safety and for high-rise buildings. And it's this BS 8644 and the digital management of fire safety documentation. And I was at London Build a little while ago. And I said, look, we've got these requirements now for digital management of fire safety documentation. But who's training people how to do this? Because I've gone all the way through my safety career. I've got no ideas about digital management of documentation other than what I've picked up along the way.
Yes, yeah.
And I feel that you've seen that the same as I have, and then you've taken it one step further with Simple Foundry. So do you want to tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to say that there's actually going to be a lot of people in the exact same boat as yourself, Peter, and there's no shame, first of all, in kind of feeling like you need to learn or kind of need to step up or kind of want to explore what you know, kind of really about using digital tech, about using sort of digital repository systems. It's literally like we kind of said a little earlier on in our chat, I think before we started recording this, Peter, but there's not that much time has gone really since literally you would walk into a business and see maybe kind of like 10 folders for fire, each relating to a different kind of section of the fire safety system. I remember my first job coming out of university, this had been 2016, and coming into kind of the health and safety office and seeing, I kid you not, it was literally a bookcase of ring binder folders and an entire shelf devoted to fire safety going back years and years, but with all the contemporary information in it as well. And I'll be honest with you, Pete, good God, it scared the hell out of me. Absolutely scared the hell out of me for two reasons. Number one is that I'm not the world's biggest fan of reading paper stuff. I absolutely love reading digital things, but I actually really struggle with like a book or something sort of paper-based in front of me. And number two, what happened if I spilt a cup of tea over one of these folders? Is it even backed up in the first place?
Yes.
So there was a lot of kind of fear in some respects, dare I say, Pete, that drove me to think about things in a slightly different way. For those who kind of don't know, my name is Peter. I'm from Leeds, and there is an element of the Yorkshireman trope here, the tight Yorkshireman trope, in the sense that if it can be done for free, I'm absolutely there for it. Combine that with the kind of mantra of a lot of safety teams where you are a team of one, but a team of 100. But unfortunately, you don't have the budget of 100 people. You have the budget of 0 people. So it's funny how the maths works around the numbers here. But ultimately, again, that lent itself to really trying to work out how can we do stuff for free or for as minimum cost as possible using the tools that we already have. And that drove me into years of trying to develop safety systems, safety management systems, document repositories, and linking everything up together with automation to minimize the administration required using Microsoft. Because fundamentally, in my mind, I said it's fairly simple. If we're going to work in a business that basically speaks English, does safety, and uses Microsoft, probably the skills are going to be pretty transferable. And that was really what drove kind of a lot of my intentions to try and learn how to use Microsoft in this way. So I'm now at a point where realistically, I'm looking to help people that are in the same position that I was. Hey, they might even be in a position even a couple of years ago from where I am, focusing on three different areas. Are they establishing their safety management system and document systems and document repositories? Are they embedding those particular systems and repositories in their business, or are they evolving them? And taking almost kind of a business maturity approach, applying the establish, embed, evolve model, and helping them work through really how can we simplify things, how can we make them better, how can we digitize, how can we automate them. It's proven to be very popular and very effective so far. I appreciate that's kind of a contemporary sort of roundabout way there for a second, Peter. But one last thing just to quickly cover as well. A lot of my experience in tech was born through my degree in environmental health. Environmental health, for those who don't know, is almost kind of a public sector enforcement / education body, if you will, within each local authority that seeks to improve kind of health and safety, food safety, environmental protection, public health, and housing performance across their defined areas. And through the time that I spent working in local authorities and working through my degree, it became really obvious that actually not a lot of people were there for the little businesses, the sole traders, the 1 to kind of 5+ employees, basically, before they get to that kind of medium territory a little later on in their journeys, where actually if we could just engage with them, teach them, engage with them, support them through setting up and actually establishing a lot of these digital systems, they can grow very nicely with the business without them having to spend an arm and a leg on it. And that's really kind of what drove me to want to try and do more with Simple Foundry, to really just help businesses of all sizes without kind of the challenges associated with some of the bigger costs with them. Do you mind if I ask you a quick question, though, just on fire for a second, Peter? Just
Go ahead.
coming back to what you're saying. I know you kind of said no one's really kind of training us on it. No one's kind of really got that information for it. Has there been any kind of position almost on what should be done? Is it all kind of expected to be self-directed, or are, for example, businesses expected to go out to arguably here a competent person to take them through how to implement these new digital systems?
No, I don't. I don't think. First of all, I think that's a really good question. I know we've got the British standard, BS 8644. I have to say, I'm going to hold my hands up and say I haven't read it, because if anyone listening to this knows, you've got to pay for British standards. If anyone's got a copy of, I might have a copy of it knocking around in draft form, actually, because they normally put it out to consultation, so at least you get the sort of the feel for what it requires. But I think no, there's a lot of misinformation going around about golden thread, about what golden thread data looks like, how it should be managed. But I think in its basic sense, when you take a building and you have a building constructed, they have to supply the principal contractor has to supply the health and safety file to the client.
Yes, yeah.
And they have to supply the O&Ms for the building. And again, even a short while ago, even a few years ago, I was going into buildings that were like PFI buildings, and PFIs have only been built within the last 20 years anyway, because they've only got a 20-year not lifespan, but 20-year lease in place, contract in place. And you'd open up a cupboard and you'd see literally 200 lever arch files full of documentation.
Wow.
Well, so, to me then, golden thread, that's the first challenge, is if we need to manage that digitally, how do we get that from those paper documents into a digital format, and then into a digital format that can be used? Because there's no point in just bulk loading folders. So you have 10,000 word PDFs that aren't searchable, aren't usable, aren't editable. It doesn't. So there's an awful lot to come out of this. I think we've got the spirit of what come out of the Hackett review, in terms of, we've got this fire safety information, we've got this building information, because it's not just fire safety. And then we've had the British standard that's been produced on fire safety information and management, fire safety management, digital management of fire safety information.
Yes, yeah.
But it hasn't really gone any further than that. And what that's sort of created, I think, is a marketplace that is open for a lot of interpretation. There are an awful lot of organizations that are seeing this as a great opportunity. And it is, I'm going to be honest, it's a great opportunity. If you're in tech and software, it's a massive market, and it's now open. But I think there are an awful lot of building owners, managers, accountable persons, managing agents that are just sort of scratching their head and going, well, what exactly do I need to do? And how simple can I make it? I'm going to interrupt this for 2 seconds just to tell you about a project. Now, I worked as a safety consultant for a long time, and I know how hard it is to get good quality leads, good clients. I set up a website and got literally no hits. The counter went to like 3 people, and I was embarrassed. It was embarrassing how much money I spent on it for no one to ever find it. It was on like page 10 of Google Ads, and I spent a fortune on advertising in trade publications and never got any feedback, thousands of pounds. And then I had to spend money on making the advert. So I've set up mysafetyconsultant.io. It's a place where you, the seller, can interact directly with your customer, and everyone's welcome. If you're a fire safety consultant, a fire extinguisher technician, fire door inspector, well-being specialist, or if you're a safety software company that sells software to business owners, you're welcome to advertise on mysafetyconsultant.io. And what's more is there's a 3-month free trial. So please give it a go. Thank you.
That I can appreciate. And there's, I know that we're kind of just using fire as an example here, but there's a lot of really nice crossover with general business practices. So, for example, I've been in now multiple businesses to establish, embed, and evolve safety management systems in a digital way. But one of the first questions that I'll ask those in a leadership position who are engaged with the process is that simple: does your business thrive on a consult and decide approach to action, or does it strive to build consensus? And actually, a lot of them kind of sit back for a second and go, well, aspirationally, we would love to build consensus, but we don't have the time, we don't have the capacity in order to do that. So instead, we're going to take a consult and decide approach. And actually, as soon as they've worked that out, it actually helps streamline the entire process of digitalization within their business. Because if they're going to build consensus, then naturally the timeline and of delivery is going to be a lot longer, versus them saying, right, okay, this is kind of our intention. What do you guys think? Is there anything by exception that you'd like to change? Okay, no, got it. Here's what we'll do then. Which is ultimately where they end up going from that kind of consult and decide approach. So I think that there's a similar process almost that needs to happen from the business mindset before people even start getting into how do we implement the fire stuff. And the same actually, I think, can be said for a lot of processes of digitalization across any business. It's less about the content of what you're digitizing. It's less about the digitizing process itself, but actually it's more about who are we as a business? How do we work? And as a result of defining those, how can we now start to engage in this process of digitalization? And on that basis, Peter, do you think, certainly not to put you on the spot here too much for a second, but do you think that a lot of safety professionals or senior leadership teams, or those in leadership involved with this type of process, take that initial step to go, who are we as a business, and how will our actions define and live up to those values and definitions before they begin?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think it's just a case of, well, what do we need to do, and what's the most straightforward way to do it? And by the way, and I don't blame business for making that decision as well. It's like,
Likewise.
how can we simplify this? How can we get this right? Because this isn't our, for want of a better word, it's, if you Well, let's take a board. A board has a fiduciary duty to act in the financial interest of the business. Does this thing actually make them any money? Probably not. Does getting all the O&Ms off of paper and putting it into a digital platform make them money? Is it going to, are they going to be able to pay the staff their wages as a result of this process? Probably not. I hate to sound cold about it, but I think, it's about how do we take this and how do we do it in the most straightforward way possible.
So I hear what you're saying. I'm going to pose a little bit of a challenge for you, though, on that, Peter, because again, I think, and this might sound a little bit like spin first. So I'm going to preface it by that. But there's a common thought process that runs through health and safety that fundamentally it's about cost avoidance. The absence of injury results in us avoiding an associated cost with it. And that's where the benefit of safety comes in. Health and safety isn't normally seen as a classic return on investment, in the sense that you spend, for example, £50,000 on something, you will get £200,000 back in like 10 years' time or whatever it's going to be. But actually, I think that there's a huge missed opportunity here for looking at health and safety as value on investment, which is really kind of defined by three things for me: productivity, resilience, and retention and success of employees. And actually, that's where we can start to thrive a little bit more. We can actually start to say that, for example, through automating health and safety, we can actually save X amount of hours every week or every month on administration. And that's really simple. I'll give you a classic example, and it would be you have a paper-based health and safety event report form. So that's for a hazard, near miss, or an incident. And you know that when someone fills it in on paper, it takes them roughly about kind of 10 minutes to do. They then wait by up to 24 hours before it's collected by a person, and then that person reviews it. They add it to Microsoft Excel. They put any pictures that's attached to it in there by scanning it, copying it on an email, so on and so forth, and then they put it kind of in a particular health and safety folder. And then they might email it and escalate it to the manager as they need to. Now, we can say that that entire process, from a man-hour point of view, takes roughly about 60 minutes. And very simply, if we just have a digital process instead that literally takes that health and safety event form, digitizes it, and then automatically does all of that administration, it can triage it, it can assess the content of what's been submitted, it can work through various logic gates, it can save it to a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet automatically, it can save it to a Microsoft Teams folder, and it can also save the attachments in that Teams folder as well. And it can do that all automatically, and it takes 15 minutes. Naturally, we can say that we've saved then 45 minutes per each report, and then extrapolate that by the amount of reports that we know that we get through a month on average. And it actually becomes much easier then to quantify the cost savings, and much easier to actually quantify the productivity gains that we can get just from that one process alone. But it's a little bit of a different way of thinking than, just with the greatest respect, than we're kind of used to in health and safety. With no disrespect to NEBOSH, IOSH, any other sort of kind of providers of any training, business acumen does not strongly move up the agenda points or kind of the module lists in any of these courses. And I think it's a massive missed opportunity when it comes down to digitalization and digitization, because it's then very difficult to be able to place the benefits in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so when we're talking about in terms of like that 45-minute saving, you could take a very simple average staff wage per hour for the organization, exactly, and then multiply it per month, multiply it by year, and then you could actually have a clear cost saving. And I think you're by the way, I completely agree, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think this is one of the things that we don't do very well as safety professionals. We use the emotive, well, it's safety, you can't put a price on someone's safety. Well, actually, we are a business function, the same as any other function within a business, and we have to justify spend and budget, and what is the return on investment for that time? What are we getting out of it? And do you know what? When you look at the accident report, by the way, I take it one step further, and even two steps further. One, it'd be really interesting to look at how many accident reports were submitted on the paper version versus how many were submitted on the far simpler and easier digital version. Because I suspect that because it's more accessible and easier, you will have more information. And we've got to remember why we're asking for these accident reports to be submitted. It's because we're trying to identify trends and prevent further accidents in the future. So whether that be incident or near miss. Does that make sense?
Completely agree. Oh, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I think that what can be a little bit daunting, and it's understandably so, but it's kind of the difference between simplicity, complexity, and complication, really. So, where we've got kind of something that's simple, that's like literally baking a cake. Yeah, you follow a recipe. If you follow that recipe exactly, then you will literally get a cake at the end. In theory, it should be the exact same cake as has been kind of made before in the picture of the recipe book. If we've got something that is complex and complicated, that's where it starts to change a little bit. And it's sort of the difference really between saying, I'm going to send someone to the moon. Now, sending someone to the moon is actually very similar to baking a cake. There's just a lot more steps in between, right? I know that there's the kind of the joke that it's not rocket science, but fundamentally, rocket science is still repeatable. Now, the opposite end of that is saying, what about raising a child? Now, for those of you who have kids that are listening to this, you'll probably be able to relate to this if you've got more than one. But you certainly can't raise one kid the same way that you'd raise another, because there's just too many variables. That second child might respond completely differently towards it. It can be ridiculously complex to try and solve all of these different challenges associated with children, as opposed to how complicated it can be to send someone to the moon. Now, on the basis of saying, right, okay, I've got a paper copy, I'm now of an accident form, I'm going to digitize it. I tell you what, that can be a really complicated process. For me, when I was taking a business through kind of a multi-year digitization strategy and we focused on accident investigation and digitizing that process, I think I worked it down to about 32 different steps over the course of the year to get to a point where we could have shared, repeatable, validated lessons that were taken from digitized accident process. And I tell you what, Pete, but yeah, that can be really daunting when you're starting to plan this out, especially if you're early in your career and thinking, "Oh my God, it's not simple. It is not simple at all." And that fear can actually paralyze a lot of people, which is a shame because the benefits that you've described there can be huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah, I've got something written down on my notes in front of me, which is getting the basics right. And I feel like, particularly with
Yeah,
incidents, a lot of accident incident forms that I've seen have been downloaded in all good faith and with the best intentions from the internet. And those accident incident forms have been designed to cover absolutely every single type of scenario. And I think
yeah,
people sometimes get confused and they feel that there's a legal requirement to record all accidents and incidents and near misses under RIDDOR. And it's like, no, there's not. There's a requirement to report certain serious incidents and accidents to the HSE under RIDDOR. And where a staff member is injured, you've got a duty to record in an accident book under, I still forget this. I want to say it's some Social Security Act and it's something to do with sick pay. But other than that, really, what are we recording accidents and incidents for? We're recording them to try and prevent future occurrence by spotting trends. And then what I sometimes do is I look at the accident incident forms that are in a company. And by the way, everybody has got those accident incidents forms saved. I'm just going to call them accident forms from now on
sure.
because it makes this quicker.
Yes, all
Everyone's
right.
got these accident forms saved in various places around the company, in various shared drives or folders, or I've got it on an email, or can you send me a copy of that accident form? So you get no consistency or continuity over the form. You can't amend it or make changes to improve the process as your requirements for different data may increase. So, for
Yeah.
example, for me, if I say, do you know what, my priority in the company this year is X, actually, it makes sense to maybe look at changing that on the accident incident form because I want more data on this area because this is our priority for this year. And that makes perfect sense to me, but for some people, it doesn't make sense. But then also, what happens is on the form, you've got a ton of other data that you just don't need. It's just junk data. And I said it in an interview with Crystal Danbury the other day that I've seen a retailer record the humidity levels at the time of
Oh no.
the accident. And it's like
Yeah.
I was sitting there scratching my head going, maybe you'd need that in a lab, but I'm not sure why you'd need that as a retailer.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
slips, trips, and falls, for example, well, actually, sorry, slips and trips, for example, not necessarily falls. You shouldn't have falls in a retailer, but slips and trips, you'd probably want more information about that because it would be a more common accident, I would suggest, in a retailer.
Yeah.
So you'd want greater detail in that area, but the rest is just junk data. It's just causing confusion. It's a barrier to getting people to fill out what you actually need from that information to prevent reoccurrence. And this is something that I'm really excited about, digital transformation, particularly with accidents and incidents, because we are at this critical point where most people are filling this out on a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. And we've got this opportunity. And by the way, I'm not saying that's a problem. What I'm saying is we don't have a single repository for all of this information. And then when we get it all in, we've got so much junk data that we can't actually do anything with it. We can't evaluate it.
Yeah.
And then when we go one step further and we start talking about AI, and we're like, well, how can AI help us? Well, if you've got 2 years worth of utter trash data, you're going to put junk in, you're going to get junk out, because you're going to ask AI to read it and it's going to go, well, you need to change the humidity levels. And you're going to be like, all right, this AI is rubbish. Well, actually, no, the AI is not rubbish. It's just what you've been collating for the last couple of years just isn't really that helpful. I know that's very crude, but what's your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. I genuinely completely agree that there's two things that quickly spring to mind. The first is a saying that I've kind of had for a couple of years now, and it's you can't improve what you don't measure, and you don't measure what you don't know. And actually, a lot of work that I do when I first go into a business is helping them work through the known unknown matrix. Have you come across it before?
Yeah,
Peter?
yeah. And
Yeah,
by the way,
perfect.
can I just interject? I love the Peter Drucker, you know, you can't improve what you don't measure. I love that sort of that Peter Drucker saying. But I one bit that I love that you've added on there is this element: you can't measure what you don't know.
Mm.
That's interesting, and that's something that I've not really heard before. But yeah, was it Rumsfeld or something that did the known unknown matrix?
Do you know, I could not tell you for my sins. I could not, but whoever it was a genius behind it, because it's been something that I've taken with me throughout my career since I came across it a few years ago. And for those who kind of aren't aware of it, if you imagine you've got kind of a four squared table, in the top left, you've got something that you are aware of and something you understand. Those are the known knowns. And naturally, then in the bottom right hand part of the table, you've got your unknown unknowns, the things that you're not aware of and the things you don't understand. And there's an element here of talking about things like black swan events, all of this, that, and the other type of stuff, which can be complex to try and unearth and complex to understand. But actually, if we take kind of the saying, if you can't improve what you don't measure what you don't know, and then apply it to the known unknown matrix and think, actually, do we have any form of measurement, even for the things that are known knowns, that are going to be value adding? So, for like you said there, Pete, well, will understanding the humidity be useful for a known resultant action? Well, actually, probably not. But actually, will the footwear of the individual at the time of the incident help us out with understanding it? Well, actually, yeah, that would be way more value adding behind it. But does our form allow us to capture any information associated with the particulars of their PPE? Maybe, maybe not. So again, there's a lot that we can start to kind of extrapolate, and a lot that we can actually start to measure and understand, and start to apply in our health and safety forms, certainly for accidents and incidents, and for near misses and hazards. Do you mind if I give you a small example of something for a second?
Go ahead.
So I joined a business as a group health and safety manager, and I had 18 sites. I had roughly about 750 staff, 3 divisions, and every kind of process that we had was predominantly paper based when I started. So, as part of creating an digital accident investigation form, the first thing was to actually create a paper form. And I know that that sounds a bit of an odd one for a say. Well, why would we create a paper form when our end target is digital? But fundamentally, there's always needed to be resilience in any digital system. And actually having a written down flow of information in a standard form actually makes it a lot easier to digitize and kind of improve and simplify as we're starting to go through it. And what I ended up with was basically 5 independent sections of a single health and safety accident investigation form. Predominantly section 1 and section 2 were associated with the who, what, when, where, why, how. And then, for example, the injury details itself or issues associated with the local environment. And actually, from the digitization piece, we didn't end up digitizing the whole accident form. We didn't do sections 1 to 5 because we realized that the vast majority of accidents that get reported actually only really need to finish at the end of section 2 because they're minor accidents. I think Crystal said to me once, you can't stop the rain. People will have an accident at one point or another. So actually having a digital system that allowed us to input section 1 and section 2 data, automatically triage that through various logic gates on Power Automate, and then send an outcome of an email to me as a competent person, the team of one, meant that I could very quickly and efficiently triage and manage all of the employer liability accidents that came through to me. And then from there say, actually, this particular accident is a bit more in depth. It's not just a paper cut. There isn't going to be an associated risk assessment that I need to have a look at for a paper cut, but there will be for this particular accident. And the amount of productivity that I was able to leverage as a result of simplifying the process, simplifying the digital form, and automating a lot of the admin was unparalleled. And the best thing was about it is that because we set it up in such a way that the managers of the local sites and the supervisors and the leaders of the CSLTs of these sites got the same information as I did, automatically everyone was on the same page straight away. And the simplified output and user interface of the information, it was a table, literally just a formatted HTML5 table in the email at the end of the automated process, meant that you didn't have to be an expert in digital tech to see what the outcome was. It was just a table. So in terms of being able to streamline processes, I'm still a big believer, Peter, that you should start writing it down on paper to begin with and then digitize it from there. Because otherwise, I think a lot of people will miss out a trick in terms of how they can simplify the process in its entirety.
That's I agree. So I'm just thinking about Simple Foundry then, which by the way I think is a genius idea because I really do see a gap in the market for this digital literacy and understanding within safety professionals. But how far does Simple Foundry go, and how, in terms of how far does it go in sort of educating and assisting to set up these processes? And how do you go about doing it? Is it face-to-face learning, or is there more hand-holding involved?
So it's a great question, and a lot of it tends to be very bespoke at the moment. So I've been working with businesses all the way from kind of sole traders who are turning over, for example, 6-7 figures a year, through to literally multinational organizations that want to move away from dedicated third-party software and try some form of a hybrid system where they integrate more Microsoft solutions into it. So without wanting to sound like a cop-out for a second, Peter, it depends. But the simplest way to start it is to literally go through what I was describing there as a data process mapping exercise that's supported by what I call an A to Z folder structure analysis. So basically an A to Z process list. So ultimately, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have a risk register where they've got their different topics that apply to health and safety in their business, most likely supported by the legal register. So that would be everything, say, for example, like DSE for D, electrical safety, fire, forklift trucks, all the way through to, for example, Lola Pure, workplace transport, workplace welfare, and literally everything in between, going all the way through to zootopic risks, if, for example, you work in with animals. So ultimately, what we'll do is we take this A to Z topic list of things that you kind of manage there, and we literally set out what are the processes that you have per each individual topic. At that point, we simply just assign it to criticality to say how critical is it that this process becomes simpler, easier, or more efficient, and then ultimately work through that data process mapping exercise to say, right, if this is your process, where does it start? What's in the middle? Where does it finish? And that forms the basis of how we digitize it and work through it together. Where I tend to do more hand holding at the request of the client is where we start to talk about business acumen and actually how do we define the benefits from that value on investment piece as much as we look at any return on investment for the work that we're doing together. So that might be literally, as we've discussed, simply saying by digitizing the process in this way, we save an hour a week. And actually, that's an hour a week per site. So for 14 sites, we're saving 14 hours a week, which equals X amount of pounds, as you say, on a normalized base salary kind of basis. All the way through to saying, actually, conceptually, how does our business structure its values and how are those values delivered through these processes? So, without kind of naming any names for a second, I was helping a large multi-site business across the UK and Ireland the other week, and we were looking at their accident investigation process, and we went through the data process map exercise, and they identified actually through that they had several pieces of communication that simply weren't going back into a feedback loop. So basically, for example, even the people that had submitted an initial report weren't getting informed what was happening with that report further down the line. And the only time that they'd find out was when an investigation was completed, which might be, for example, 1 to 2 weeks away from when they actually submitted it in the first place. Now, if you imagine from a commercial point of view, if you're a customer of a particular business, and as a customer, you dropped them an email or sent them through a request for something and you didn't hear back anything, you didn't even have a validation that what you'd sent through had even been received for 2 weeks, you'd be pretty annoyed. And you'd probably think, actually, the quality of this service isn't as good as it could be. I might look elsewhere. So working with businesses, it's never just about the actual kind of process itself from a pure health and safety legislative point of view, but it's also thinking about us as an internal business, an internal consultancy as a function almost, to say, how are we adding value to our clients, to our customers in the business? And how is that manifesting itself through the processes that we have? What quality, what assurance do we have that we can give back to complete these feedback loops, complete engagement loops that ultimately can see benefits, for example, in sort of pulse surveys and things in the future where people feel engaged with safety because by design, the processes engage them. So I know that, again, that's quite a roundabout answer, Peter, but if I was to really simplify it there, we start with a risk register, legal register, A to Z process analysis, support that with business process mapping, and then go through bespoke development of processes together, taking business acumen, commercial kind of considerations into factor here, and ultimately looking at the processes in its entirety beyond just the benefits that we get from a health and safety function into really treating our employees as customers and maximizing their experience in every possible way.
Yeah, I like that. I think one of the other things that I'm thinking about is when you take software systems, you mentioned about third-party software, which by the way, I have to say, I love third-party software. I love it. You know, this is one of the things, one of the reasons for the show. But I also realize that third-party software isn't all things to all people.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so for a lot of businesses, third-party software just isn't an option. And in those circumstances, I think SharePoint is a great option because you're effectively partnering with the biggest software provider in the world. So as the systems develop, you know it's going to automatically integrate into your system. And
Absolutely.
so I know we very, very briefly, I messaged you about the Microsoft AI Copilot. And you did tell me that you haven't worked with it too much, so I'm not going to put you on the spot here. But it's just exciting to think that if we've built all of our safety information into SharePoint, that that there is this AI integration coming, and well, it is here,
Absolutely,
and it's developing, and it's going to keep getting better and better. And then we all automatically have this artificial intelligence element for our safety software system.
100%. If I give you a very small example, so I was working with a company, again, it's quite sort of a multinational company, focusing on one of their divisions in the UK. And we wanted to engage with effectively their approved contractors. So there's about kind of 8,000 of these. And we wanted to ask a few questions, a mixture of closed and open questions. But if we're thinking, good God, how would we analyze thousands of responses from basically a survey that we send out? Actually, within Power Automate, you've got something called AI Builder, which is actually slightly different to Copilot for a second. AI Builder is basically a kind of like a tool built into the automation suite of Microsoft. And it allows you to automatically analyze sentiment within open text questions as just an example of one thing it can do. You can actually build AI models for actually a lot of different things using it. But out of the box, you can automatically do sentiment analysis. So what we ended up doing as part of this survey was using sentiment analysis to automatically analyze positivity, neutrality, and negativity in set responses to open questions, and then reference that and combine that against NPS, which is Net Promoter Score. Are you familiar with NPS?
Yes.
Before I quickly move on. Perfect. For those who aren't, NPS is a marketing measure used to analyze whether or not someone is basically a promoter of your business, if they are kind of neutral toward it, or basically if they're, let's say, detractors, basically, where they might speak negatively about your business to other people. And we use that almost as a bit of a benchmark, Peter, against the sentiment analysis. And we actually found that the sentiment analysis complemented the NPS scores incredibly well, but gave us a much stronger understanding for the type of thematic discussions that promoters, kind of neutrals and detractors would have when given the opportunity in an anonymous survey to share their thoughts about kind of the wider company that they were working as a contractor for. So what I'd say is that we're just scratching the surface almost of what AI can actually do for us. So if we, for example, let's say we had like 20,000 staff in a business, and we wanted to analyze sentiment to an open text question about how do you feel about health and safety in the business, rather than getting one poor admin to spend weeks and weeks trawling through all of these responses and thematically coordinating them, we can do it literally instantly using AI Builder in Power Automate. It's phenomenal. And for those who haven't experienced Copilot just yet, have you got the Bing app by any chance?
Yeah.
On your phone? Yeah, perfect. So
and it's on there. Yes.
It's on there. It's literally already on there. So if you're thinking, what the hell is Copilot? Genuinely, just download the Bing app on your mobile phone and then ask it. Just literally ask it, what are you? What do you do? Because I promise it'll be able to give a much more concise answer than certainly what I'll be able to right now. But to that end, the accessibility of AI, oh my God, Peter, I can't wait to see what the next few years are going to bring and how ultimately health and safety professionals will start to use it day to day. It's a truly exciting time.
How do you think it's going to improve safety? What do you think is going to be the next, not the next big thing, but what do you think is going to bring the most notable change from AI?
It's a good question. How is AI going to be used in the future, sort of in the near future? What I think we'll actually find is that the health and safety professions' experience with AI will be without them realizing it in some respects. I think where we see, for example, bigger third-party software companies having the capacity to integrate AI into their processes, that they'll do that already. So, for example, I'm going to say in my day job, but in Risk Fluent, we've got a risk assessing app. It's called Risk Assessor Pro. And that, even as a relatively small app, already has AI integration into it. So, for example, it can support you defining really what your risks and controls might be relative to a certain hazard library that you set up for certain issues in your business. I think that we'll start to see a lot more of that level of accessibility just grow and grow and grow. And I do think that we'll find risk assessments being actually a significant focus of where AI can help. Because in theory, Peter, we've got decades of experience of knowing that a risk assessment with these controls will result in that accident outcome. Basically, we can quantify it almost on a process by process or area by area basis. And actually, if we can train AI models, which actually is becoming, as I say, more accessible nearly every day, if we can train AI models on certain hazards in certain areas with certain controls, will minimize the chance of an accident and the likelihood of it happening. We might actually find that AI automatically prompts discussion in a certain direction if those controls haven't been filled in for certain risk assessments in those areas in the future. And that's a really simplistic approach to it. Other than that, I actually think that we'll start to see just health and safety professionals question AI more in the same way that we kind of see all of the chatbots at the moment, if we see chatbots that are specifically focused on health and safety, be that sector by sector or potentially just profession wide, we'll start to see certain GPT models actually provide us with answers to our questions in these areas. So I think we'll see a load of those type of things coming through. And I can see it happening for, I'm going to say, potentially more influencers in some respects. So, in the sense that, do I think it would be a natural progression for, say, Sydney Decker to create a similar type of model so that there could be people that says, right, okay, new view safety obviously has been around for a few years now. How do I implement it in this area or that area? That we might see some form of that style of GPT development move in where you do have, like, for example, the Sydney Deckers, the Clive Lloyds of the world, for example, the like Paradigm Human Performance, the Risk Fluence of the world type of thing, really building their own AI models and chatbot type approaches that allows people to have much more accessibility to what they've developed, what they've delivered, and the content that they've created over the years. I'm curious though, Peter, how about yourself? What do you think? Where do you think AI is going to go for the profession in the future?
Do you know what? I think as long as we concentrate on getting the basics right, we're going to be all right. I think
Yes.
one of my
Yeah.
things with safety is that we've got the basics, and then we detract from that so much that actually it can start to cause complication and confusion. And I think I think we're there at the moment in the well-being world. I think we're there with workplace stress, is that it's very hard to quantify what actually works. I think AI will help us to collect the right data that we need and really drill down into what actually works. Is I just feel like AI is going to help us to cut through an awful lot of the chaff that's in our industry and help us to focus on exactly what is going to make the difference.
I think in some ways, dare I say that we're coming slightly full circle for a second. Correlation doesn't imply causation, but it can be very interesting to see the relationships between different streams of data and different perhaps columns of data in a particular event. And I think that if anything, what we might find is that where we start with a wide selection of data that we capture, AI will do a much stronger job of being able to tell us consistently and repeatedly. And I think that will become quite a key area of where AI can help.
What else do you think we should be talking about in terms of digital transformation? Because I don't want to keep talking about AI, so let's go a bit broader.
No, that I can appreciate. That I can appreciate. I'm trying to think of not necessarily a controversial way of saying this, but I think a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at digital transformation before looking at the basics. And I know that you've mentioned the basics first for a second, but we see a lot of businesses that are kind of saying, oh, I'm ready to go for the digital transformation stuff, but they do it almost in isolation or mutual exclusivity to the technical performance of the business. So, for example, how up to date are the risk assessments? How lived are the actual controls? Are there any controls that are even measured as part of this as well? Be that through, for example, the equivalent of a critical control point or PI in a process for that particular control. There's very little proof in some respects that the technical lived actions are actually working other than just the absence of accidents. But as I'm sure you and I both know here, Pete, the absence of accidents doesn't always reflect the success of the process.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's this huge push to say, right, let's get ready for the digital future. Let's get ready for Industry 4.0, all that type of stuff, which is great. But for me, the first recommendation is always, how are we looking at these 2 points in tandem? What does the appetite of the business look like to invest in technical support and technical enhancement at the same time as going through the digital transformation piece? And once we've kind of reconciled those two, the simple starting point, I think, for a lot of businesses is to say, actually, what are we already doing that's really good? Well, how about yourself? Is there anything that you've kind of seen either now or maybe even something that's emerged post-COVID that you feel actually we should be kind of looking at from that digital transformation piece?
I think for me, it really is this process of simplifying data and getting ready for the tech that's coming. And I think it's also about when we have software systems, recognizing that they're not going to be able to do everything. So we need to select software based on what we can integrate an API. And I also think it's about now looking at software on the whole as a company. And I'll give you one example, something I said on another podcast, or it might have been a LinkedIn post, is that, say in health and safety, we work in silo. I know that was really that really should have been gone when we looked at ISO systems, but in some companies we still work in silo, and then we say, okay, well, in health and safety, what we're going to do is we're going to manage contractors and contractor management. Okay, well, we have a software system we'll get a contractor management system where we upload all of their contractor information, contact details, addresses, key persons, risk assessments, method statements, insurances, all of this documentation. And then we can either authorize them or not authorize them to do works on this contractor management system. And then literally across the way, we have a finance department, and they have a financial system where they upload all of the contractor information, their contact details, their key persons. They have access to store their documentation. And I think it's just about taking that step back sometimes and thinking, hang on, who else is going to have all this contractor information? And could we just not manage contractors through that system instead? Do we have to manage it through our health and safety system? Can I not work with finance and just say, yeah, they're approved or not approved? I mean, by the way, I'm not saying that's a definite. I'm just saying that to me is the sort of decision making that we need to, or the way we need to think about this in the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful point that you've made. Do you think that a lot of health and safety professionals are ready to articulate that style of solution to the boards or kind of to their senior leaders and help them work through the definitions of what that could look like? Or do you think that we need to do more to support health and safety professionals in that particular sense?
Yeah, I think we need to do more. I think we need to do more. And I don't think there's no criticism leveled at any safety professionals here. It's just, if you look at all of the training that we do, and you think back through all of your training courses, all of your qualifications, it doesn't seem to be discussed in this way. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, completely. I totally agree. Totally agree.
And I think it comes down to, let me go a bit abstract for a second here. I think it was on LinkedIn. There was a video with some wheat growing in a field, and there was a robot chopping the wheat, like a humanoid robot, arms, legs, body, head, with a little size, chopping the wheat and wrapping it up really quickly, and tying it into bundles. And and people, the comments on there, thousands of comments saying, "Oh my God, this is scary. I can't believe this is happening with robots." And I just thought to myself, if that's all we're capable of seeing, is the ability of this technology just to create an already very ineffective system of this humanoid bending down and then cutting wheat with a scythe. I mean, that to me is, it's a limitation of our ability to think. And what I mean by that is that if we have access to all of the technology and have access to all of this ability to completely redesign a system, why would we design an already inefficient system just to do it with a robot instead of a human? Actually, what you'd be better off doing is completely redesigning the system from seed to table in terms of food. So I don't know, by the way, make the whole ground a conveyor belt so it moves, and then also, I don't know, but you wouldn't just create another humanoid style shape out of a robot, because it's inefficient. And I think this is a limitation of our thinking. And just to double it back, just to circle back very quickly, is that this is where I think the limitations are in safety, is that we don't know what we don't know. And I don't think a lot of safety professionals have been exposed to other departments within organizations or other ways of thinking in terms of digital literacy, of digital transformation. And I think this is what is going to slightly hold us back over the next 5 years, because this wave of digital transformation is coming. We can see it. You can see it. I can certainly see it. But I don't think the safety professionals that are coming through and still coming through today are being trained to think about it in this way.
It's a really good point. There's So back in the time that I was on the IOSH Future Leaders Community Steering Group, one of the biggest demands that were coming through the mentor platform, the mentorship platform, was information on strategy planning and basically strategic design. A part of me kind of thinks, actually, are we missing a trick in some respects by not empowering certainly a lot of emerging professionals that are coming through with the core skill set of strategic planning, strategic development, and then applied digital transformation in that context. You know, I love the thought process that you have, that you articulated very nicely there about we don't think big enough. In some respects, Peter, I think, I hate to say it, but as a profession, I do think we backed ourselves into a corner in some respects through the design of what we do on a daily basis. So, for example, if we look at a risk assessment for an activity and we assess the risk of that activity, the vast majority of the time, 99% of the time, we solely look at that particular process and procedure and the risks associated with it at that particular time. But we don't contextualize the risk of the process in relation to where the process sits in the bigger picture. So, for example, if that particular process that we're assessing is 3/4 of the way down the full process from, say, seed to table, let's say that we're analyzing picking up the seeds and putting it on the table. If we're just solely focused on the activity of lifting and carrying and moving, are we missing a trick by not analyzing how we could potentially automate the conveyor to literally move it for us, or to literally put on an automatic scissor lift type of thing, and actually change the process by design to say, actually, as you say, the whole thing could be automated in a different way? And I agree with you in the sense that I don't think there's enough that's being done to teach that style of fundamental thought process, and certainly not enough that's being done to help the contextual application of where digital transformation and digital tools can support those bigger picture changes. And I think that for safety to really thrive, especially over the next few years as we see digitization and automation be much more strongly adopted, I think we do need to see a real change and a lot more support coming in for professionals at all stages of their career around how we can do these type of things and how we can effectively change the world for the better in this way.
Peter, it's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, brilliant. Likewise. Thank you so much for that. And it's been such a pleasure to work through this. I was just looking through the notes on here. We've covered SharePoint, Copilot, AI Builder, Teams, digital literacy, digital transformation. We've covered thinking bigger, thinking smaller, that kind of think global, act local mindset around stuff. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to come on. So thank you very much for that, Peter. And if anyone would like to reach out to me, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to go with.
Amazing. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode, then please like and subscribe. It really does make a difference to the show. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.